Hey, don't rage quit bro here, bringing you guys another build guide. This is one of the strongest builds at this price point I have ever played. The clear is insane and so is the single target. This does come at a price however, and in this case it's the complexity of the mechanics the build utilizes. I'll do a brief overview of the idea at play, then try to dive into a bit more detail on each of the items as well. The build concept revolves around one of the new flasks from 3.15, Olroth Resolve, which makes your ward not break during flask effect. We stack various methods of increased flash charges gained, reduced flash charges used, and increased flask duration to make it so we have 100% uptime on this flask, and then we use enkindling orbs to make it so the flasks automatically use itself at the end of effect so we don't have to worry about pushing buttons. We stack ward on 3 of our gear pieces and grab global defenses where we can to boost our ward total. We will have 5 cast when damage taken setups, 2 of which will proc the other 3, and we utilize the new recoup mechanic on both life and mana to get insane recovery. Let's dive into more detail on the first and most important part, 100% uptime on the flask. A 20% quality flask will give us a duration of 6 seconds. The timeless jewel for Balbala transforms nearby keystones into the Trader, which gives us 4 flash charges per empty flask slot every 5 seconds. We want this to proc twice per flask usage, so we first need our flask to be at least 10 seconds in duration. Some quick math tells us we need at least 66.6 repeating percent increased flask duration to achieve this. We grab 2 5 passive medium clusters for flask duration, both with notables Distilled Perfection and Fasting. Each 5 passive setup gives 22% duration, totaling 44%. We need to pick up that last 23% or more on our belt. Next, let's talk about charges used. By default, Iron Flask use 40 out of 60 charges, and I personally use a 41% flask. I have a 20% reduced charges used mod on my belt, bringing this to a 21% increased charges used, and totaling 48 charges consumed per use. So now we have the goal of gaining at least 48 flask charges every 10 seconds. If we have 3 empty flask slots, the Trader gives us 12 charges per rotation, and with 2 rotations, that's 24 charges gained. The notables on the clusters mentioned previously give us a total of 40% increased charges gained, and the Essence Extraction cluster gives us another 35%, totaling 75% increased charges gained. 75% of 24 is 18, and adding those two together we're at 42, which is a little shy of our 48 charge goal. We can finish this off by taking the Flask Mastery on the Essence Extraction cluster by selecting the utility flasks gain 1 charge every 3 seconds. I can't 100% confirm, but as this works, I believe flask charges are rounded up and down at the 0.5 mark. Because if we get 1.75 charges every 3 seconds and this procs 3 times in a 10-second window, it would either be 5.25 charges or 6. And if it was 5.25, then we wouldn't be able to get to the 48, we'd be at 47 still. Once you think you have your flask duration and charges set up properly, go to your hideout, hit your flask, then Alt-Tab or take a break 5-10 minutes, come back and see if your flask broke. Assuming it didn't, then you should be good to go to move on to the next step, which is going to be the cast when damage taken setups. The way the whole loop is started is with a weapon swap, which is simply slapping an Essence of Insanity onto a couple of wands. I am literally using an eye level 3 wand as we don't care about any mods except what the Insanity inherently gives us. Next, let's talk about our Summon Skeleton setup. This has to be perfect in order to maximize efficiency. This will be a 4-link setup with a level 5 regular cast when damage taken, a 20/20 anomalous minion speed, a 20/20 regular less duration, and a level 11 anomalous summon skeletons with at least 3% quality. Now by default, this gem drops as, I think it's 1615 in Heist, so what we have to do is the Scour Vendor recipe to de-level the gem and get it to a level 11. This only works on non-corrupted gems, and if you don't know about this, you simply take a single scour orb and the gem in question and sell it to any NPC vendor, and they'll give you back the same gem minus 1 level. In regards to cast when damage taken, it has an internal cooldown of 0.25 seconds. So what we want is to get our skeleton duration exactly 0.25 seconds. By using the gem links already mentioned above, this is half the battle. The other half is getting 3 2-dust jewels, which give you a total of 57% reduced duration between the 3. The cheapest method will be getting 3 19s, but you could get like a 20, a 19, and an 18, or a 20, 20, 17. That's fine too, you just need 57 total. And to make the insanity weapons and your skeletons proc, we need to use 1 heartbound loop ring with noxious catalyst. This will make it so we take 420 damage per minion that dies. We want 0 armor on all gear so that we don't mitigate any of that damage. And because our ward is higher than this 420 damage, we will actually be taking 0 damage from all of this. Our skeletons will proc our other self-damaging setup, which is a 2-link with a level 1 cast and damage taken and a level 1 Forbidden Rite. Forbidden Rite does chaos damage to us, and we need to be careful about what our chaos resistance is in order to maximize efficiency again. Additionally, this will also proc our other low-level cast and damage taken setup, which I currently have as a 3-link level 1 cast and damage taken, level 1 desecrate, and level 20 arcane surge. Between the skeletons and the Forbidden Rite, this will be enough damage to proc our main 6-link damage setups. Note, Divergent cast when damage takens are highly desirable, but to start it is viable to use regular cast when damage takens. We just have to do math. I personally did not do this and I just bought Divergence, but I did do some math which should be good for you guys. Let's assume my setup. Our level 20 cast when damage taken setup on the weapon has a damage threshold of 3,272, and our level 22 setup on the chest has a damage threshold of 3,950. Divergent Determination lowers this, giving us new values of 2,617 and 3,160 respectively. Now because we know the 3160 triggers, that's the only one we need to care about. So we need to correlate that damage threshold with the level of the cast and damage taken. Looking at the PoE wiki, we can see a level 19 has a damage threshold of 3,142, which is just under our 3160 that we already have. So we'll be using a level 19 setup on both the weapon and the chest. However, we need to take into consideration the +2 that the chest is giving us, so all the gems in the chest will need to be a level 17. Now what this ends up meaning is you're just going to have a few lower levels on your damage gems, so you're going to end up doing less damage because of this. So I highly recommend using Divergent cast when damage taken. Now this is rough math, and because Forbidden Rite is a percentage of your life, there's no way I can calculate this for every single person. You're just gonna have to play with it. You might be 1 or 2 levels off from this level 19 theory that I have here. Now let's talk about what we're putting in those 6-link setups. I chose to get all 3 damage types, and I'll go over here why shortly. In my weapon I have a 420 awakened added cold damage, 520 awakened cold penetration, 2020 divergent cast and damage taken, 2022 divergent arc, 2020 frostbolt, and 2020 ice nova. In my chest I have 520 awakened fire pen, 2020 critical strikes, 2020 critical multi, 2020 divergent cast and damage taken, 2020 anomalous volatile dead, and 2020 divergent blazing salvo. Note, the awakened gems are not required, just use regular gems until you can afford them, and do not get the level 5 awakened added cold unless you are using level 19 cold gems, or else that +1 that you get at level 5 will brick the setup. Let's finish up our skill gems. On the other 2 sockets that our Forbidden Rite is set up on, we'll take Purity of Elements and Val Righteous Fire. We'll be using an unset ring, and we can socket Flame Dash here for some mobility. It wasn't until recently I got the upgrade with the Assassin's Mark on Hit mod, and prior to that, I had Assassin's Mark in my Desecrate setup. Now that it's on the ring, I made that piece of gear a 3-link setup and have phase run on the 4th socket. This will wrap up our gem selections. Next, let's go over gear. Our chest will be Skin of the Lords, as it grants 100% global defenses, which boosts our ward total. There are a few decent keystones that we can use, and I'd say the best two are going to be Unwavering Stance and Iron Will. Note, the socket colors cannot be bench modified on this item, so you need to get the colors you want at the initial purchase. On our gloves, boots, and helmet, we are stacking as much ward as we can get, picking up some res or dex or other beneficial stats for the suffixes where we can. Our weapon will be Dusk Dawn, and the most important stat here is the percent of elemental as extra chaos. On the belt, I went with the Stygian, with increased flask duration and reduced flask charges used, grabbing a touch of life and res here as well. And I chose the Stygian as Abyss Jewels are easy to play with for attributes, dexterity, resistances, and an easy way to pick up corrupted blood immunity. One of our rings will be the Heartbound Loop that we already discussed, and between the next two items, the other ring and amulet, we'll need one of them to have an open prefix that we can craft on, and we'll want to put on the craft that is percent of damage recouped as mana on that piece. The Unset ring I also chose to get reduced effect of curses, and this is also the same mod that I have on my suffix for my flask, and by adding the two together, curse immune. And thanks to Purity of Elements, I am also ailment immune. Our amulet, we have quite a bit of play here, but I went with a double pen, and I am still in the process of spamming Reforge Keep prefix until I get some nice suffixes like Crit Multi, for example. This wraps up gear, and let's move on to the skill tree and Ascendancy. To start, let's talk about exposure. By taking corrosive elements on our large cluster jewel, all of our damage will be causing exposure. We take the elemental mastery for increased effect, boosting this to 18%, and our Ascendancy is going to take it a step higher, giving us an additional 25% penetration. Our Ascendancy points will be Mastermind of Discord, Heart of Destruction, Shaper of Winter, Bastion of Elements. We grab the Interrogation in order to pick up Secrets of Suffering, and we take full advantage of this keystone. Scorched will be giving us up to another 30% penetration, Brittle is going to be making the enemy take more crits, and Sapped will make them deal less damage to us. For the tree, there really isn't much left to discuss that hasn't already been said. Remaining points will be dumped into life and damage, including the Tireless cluster to help reduce mana costs a bit. POB will be in the description below. Next is Pantheons. If you are able to get 80% chance to avoid being stunned on the boots, I'll recommend Soul of Lunaris. Otherwise, grab Soul of the Brine King to help from getting stun locked. For the miner, we'll be taking Soul of Ralakesh, as we're ailment immune, and this is good enough to not require a corrupted blood jewel. I did, however, pick up a CB jewel because 0 stacks is in fact less than 5 stacks. And that about wraps it up. Thanks for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed this build as much as I am. I'll leave you guys with a Maven kill, and have a nice day.
The prize piece comes to join
my collection.
Stand still.
Pain will be returned tenfold. Space aligns. Behold my collection.
I will have what I want. This will not be an escape. Scurry, scurry. Stand still.
Death made real.
A cascade of pain. Why?
Resistance will be punished. Time controls. Scurry.
My irritation is growing. Death will not be an escape. Scurry. Do what I say. Stand still. How?
Stop resisting. Reality bends. Punishment inescapable.
Arrogant toy. Death will not be an escape. Scurry. Take this. Stand still. A cascade.
The living toy must enjoy our contests.